Hi, welcome back to our Lenten Bible study on the book of Psalms. Right now, I decided to find a quiet space, sit in a nice, comfy chair, enjoy a lovely cup of coffee, and read through the book of Psalms. It's helpful to find a space where you can do this so that it's easier, it's comfortable. You can find routine in it. So that's what I'm doing today. Enjoying my coffee, Disney mug, enjoying my coffee and reading through the book of Psalms. And I stumbled upon, for this week's reading, Psalm 23. I think you know it already. In these familiar passages, sometimes it's hard to find a new message. So let's look through Psalm 23 to see what we can learn. So first, I want you to know that this poem is one that children have learned about. They have learned it by heart. It has sustained the mature complexities of life, and that it has been a peaceful benediction on the lips of those who are dying. This is a quote from Bernard Anderson. And I think that sums it up well. We know this one well, and we use it. We can't imagine a funeral without reading Psalm 23, and not just reading it, but saying it aloud together. And it's one of the first that we encourage children to memorize. It is one of the most memorized and recited passages in the Bible. And it begins with the very first line. The very first line tells us everything. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. So we have a metaphor, and it is a guiding metaphor. So we look to what we know about a shepherd. Now, I don't know about you, but I'm not used to herding sheep. I'm not familiar with the work of a shepherd. And it's not as commonplace as it was at this time that we find ourselves reading this Old Testament passage from Psalms. It wasn't commonplace, but for them it was. For those who are around when this is being written and used in worship on a regular basis, herding of sheep was a regular job, something that somebody did. And yes, there are still shepherds doing their work today, but it's not as commonplace as it once was. The second thing I really notice is that by saying, the Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want, I see a person who is completely filled by the shepherd, by God. And that's hard to imagine these days. We fill our lives with so many things: bigger houses, better cars, bigger vacations, wanting the update designer clothes, wanting the latest media and technology. It's all about our wants. Can we imagine a God who fulfills everything we want? I think that's a hard question. And also, we know the general gist of what a shepherd does: leads sheep, leads them to food, keeps them safe, keeps them out of harm, and puts away all danger. Shepherd has a very important role, and I need God to fulfill those roles in my life, to lead me on the right path, to keep me away from danger, to sustain me with food, and to sustain me with spiritual knowledge and the presence of the Spirit. I need all those things. The last thing I wanted to think about when we talk about just what comes up with Lord is my shepherd is that leaders are often referred to as shepherds. Now, I know I've heard that today, but that was also a very commonplace understanding in the ancient world. So that's an important thing for us to think about. When we come to understand Psalm 23, we need to look through an Old Testament lens. What would they have gotten out of this passage? What would it have meant at the time? And we need to read into it and remember the story of the Exodus and the exile, what the Jewish people went through. Their exodus from Egypt into the wilderness, following only God, seeking the promised land and knowing that it had been promised and getting there. And then later when they're exiled, because of who they are as a people and being taken away from their home. And again, the promise of being returned home and having their home in God. And so viewing it in that way, there's a few things that come to mind. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. That reminds us that they lacked for nothing in the wilderness. And even in exile, they still had their basic needs. Think about the times where the people grumbled and God responded through Moses. They got water, they got food, they had quail and manna. It may have come with rules, it may have come at particular times, but it was there for them. Also, we hear that as the Lord is my shepherd, will lead me in right paths. And God always led Israel, guided them through the wilderness, even when they didn't know where they were going, even when they were unsure of their path. God was guiding them and taking them to the promised land. That is direction and guidance that I feel I need. But to see how the people of Israel would have seen this image. And also to prepare a table before me. Again, this goes back to food and sustaining them, that God prepared a table for them, even in the wilderness. And that provides incredible promise for us today. When you think about the Lord is my shepherd, I hear two things. If God is my shepherd, God is caring for not just me, but for all of us. God is caring for God's people. That's a very corporate notion, a community notion. So we have that view of what the shepherd does. And think about a shepherd caring for hundreds of sheep. God is caring for lots of people. But also, God is my shepherd. The Lord is my shepherd. It's a personal thing. So we feel intimate knowledge with God, but also we know that God is taking care of us as a whole. The end of the psalm catches me with an amazing bit of hope. It's two of the most hopeful claims in all of Scripture. The first hope is this: surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life. Now this claims that when you follow the shepherd, when you follow God and see the Lord as your shepherd, we follow a God that we know that will faithfully look after his people, will rescue them from slavery, will provide guidance in the wilderness, and lead them to the promised land. We see those promises as Israel received them and know that those promises are there for us today. There is great hope in knowing that the Lord as my shepherd will continue to fulfill that role for me. The second hope is that Israel, that I shall dwell in the house of the Lord forever. And the house of the Lord is equal to the Jerusalem temple. We need to think about where the Jewish people understood the presence of God to be. The presence of God was in the temple. And that is the ultimate goal, to dwell with God forever. There is great hope. There is great joy in thinking about this psalm, remembering all the times that it would bring us comfort when we've heard it at a funeral, when we've said those words, and we've heard our children learn these very words. I want to leave you today with a question. The question is this: churches, companies, and countries are in need of good leadership. And you and I have talked about this in worship. We've talked about leadership, Christian leadership that is needed today. So, if Psalm 23, telling us about the Good Shepherd, is providing a model for leadership, what are the characteristics of a good leader that we see from reading the 23rd Psalm? I hope this helps you today during this season of Lent.